Jimmy Bartlett became a professional ice hockey player on October 10, 1954. Before turning pro, Jimmy had outstanding seasons in junior and senior amateur hockey. In his last season of junior, Jimmy broke the record for both goals and points in a season by a defenseman. In his first year as a forward, Jimmy scored 32 goals and won the national championship with the Cincinnati Mohawks. The next season, the Montreal Redwings won their league and were quarterfinalists in the Canadian National Amateur Championship. As the only player from English descent in the entire league, Jimmy scored 43 goals, which was second in the league in scoring, and was named the first-team All-Star. After his season in Montreal was over, the press reported that Jimmy had signed a B form with the Montreal Canadiens. This is shocking because the B form was used so rarely and only for the most elite players. As far as I know, only Jean Bellevue and Jacques Plante signed B forms. If Jimmy really had signed a B form, he could have immediately demanded a contract with the Montreal Canadiens at league average salary. If they refused to give him that, he would be released and could be a free agent and sign with any other team. This never happened because Jimmy had no idea what he was signing. He never read the form. He had no idea what he was signing. All he knew is that he was happy that after he signed it, the Montreal Canadiens gave him $50. In 1953, Jean Bellevue was the top amateur hockey player in the world. However, he did not want to turn pro and was happy playing in the Quebec Senior Hockey League. So the Montreal Canadiens bought the Quebec Senior Hockey League, changed its name to the Quebec Hockey League, and made it a professional league, which automatically turned Bellevue professional as well. This newly formed professional hockey league is where Jimmy Bartlett made his debut in 1954. The French city of Chicoutimi lies on the Saguenay River in Quebec, with the residents referring to themselves as the Saguenéens. When Jimmy arrived to play for the Chicoutimi Saguenéens, or SAGs for short, he was greeted with great fanfare as if he were already a big star. For instance, there was a 3-page spread in the SAGs program that year all about Jimmy Bartlett. According to the article, whenever Jimmy would go out with his friends and would meet a single French girl, he would break out into a song and would serenade her with the French drinking song, Catherinette, a song dedicated to all the old maids out there who haven't been married yet. When Jimmy arrived in Chicoutimi, head coach Roland Hebert put Jimmy on a line that he dubbed the Kid Line, with Red Leger at right wing, and Jimmy's old line mate from the Cincinnati Mohawks, Del Topple, at center. The Kid Line immediately clicked and became the top line of the SAGs. The leading scorer for the SAGs that year was a forward by the name of Stan Smirk. Smirk was the very first person born in Yugoslavia to ever play in the NHL. However, he was most famous for his 8-year stay playing left wing for the Rochester Americans in the American Hockey League in the 1960s. Jimmy Bartlett scored his very first goal as a professional hockey player on October 14, 1954. The Saguenéens, also nicknamed the Chicks by their fans, were winning 6-1 against the Valleyfield Braves with a minute and a half left in the game, when Jimmy knocked in the puck for a 7-1 victory. Assisting on his very first professional goal were his line mates Red Leger and Del Topple. The goalie who was victimized by Bartlett first as a professional was Andre Payette of the Valleyfield Braves. A teammate named Jimmy Moore was severely injured in that game with a broken leg and had to be hospitalized as a result of a violent collision with another player. 1 week later, got his very first professional hat trick as he scored 3 goals, including the winning goal in overtime against the Ottawa Senators and goalie Ray Frederick. In 1954, boxing's heavyweight champion of the world was the great Rocky Marciano, who was the only heavyweight boxer in history to ever retire undefeated with a perfect record. Marciano did this despite being very small for a heavyweight. He weighed less than 200 pounds and was only 5'10". Nevertheless, he had devastating punching power and was famous for knocking out much bigger opponents with only one punch. Since Jimmy was doing basically the same thing on ice skates, the fans and the sports writers in Chicoutimi started referring to Jimmy as Rocky Bartlett, a nickname that stuck for many years. 3 days later, Rocky Bartlett did his best to live up to his new nickname by getting kicked out of the game against the Montreal Royals after he got into a fight with Ike Hillenbrand while the two of them were already sitting in the penalty box. Although Jimmy didn't stop fighting, he also didn't stop scoring. In the very next game, Jimmy scored the tying goal and the winning goal against the Royals. Jimmy was given another nickname by some sports writers who were referring to him as Jim the Terror Bartlett. Besides collecting nicknames, Jimmy was also collecting goals at a rapid pace as well. He scored the tying goal in a third-period comeback victory against Valleyfield and scored goals in the Chicks' victory against Quebec and also against the Montreal Royals. Rocky Bartlett must have realized that he was going to get nothing but coal for Christmas when on December 23rd he was kicked out of the game by his own coach, Riley Hebert, after a running duel between Jimmy and Quebec's Larry Regan escalated into a brawl with spectators and the police. On Christmas Eve, Jimmy was involved in another fight, this time against Quebec's Marius Groslo, which was described as a fistic affray that contributed something to a very exciting event. Despite Jimmy's holiday fisticuffs, he ended up getting a very nice Christmas present when the front page of the newspaper read, "Rocky Bartlett va jouer pour Canadiens." Rocky Bartlett to play for the Canadiens. He was getting called up to play for the Montreal Canadiens in the NHL. The Montreal Canadiens were coached by the legendary Dick Irvin. Dick Irvin had a Hall of Fame career playing mostly for the Regina Capitals in the Western Canada Hockey League and the Chicago Blackhawks in the NHL back in the 1920s. His son, also named Dick Irvin, was a recipient of the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award for his work as a broadcaster for 35 years on Hockey Night in Canada. Just like Scotty Bowman, Dick Irvin's playing career ended due to a fractured skull caused by a high stick to the head. And just like Scotty Bowman, Dick Irvin then had a long, successful career as a head coach in the NHL. He coached the Toronto Maple Leafs to the Stanley Cup championship in 1932, the year that Rocky Bartlett was born, and won 3 more cups for the Montreal Canadiens in the 1940s and 1950s. He was the first NHL coach to win 600 games in a career and was the all-time winningest coach until his record was beaten by Scotty Bowman. As a coach, Dick Irvin wanted his team to play with maximum intensity at all times. Even in practice, he wanted to see aggressive, physical, hard-hitting, no-holds-barred, passionate hockey. He saw his role as coach as to turn up the emotional heat on his players so they would simmer just below the boiling point, as close to the edge as possible. No player exemplified this as much as Irvin's star pupil, Maurice the Rocket Richard. Richard was basically the Babe Ruth of hockey. In 1954, if you asked anybody who was the greatest hockey player who ever lived, the answer was Rocket Richard. To this day, he is still the most iconic French-Canadian hockey player of all time, even more so than Guy Lafleur and Mario Lemieux. Most believe that Richard received his famous nickname because he skated so fast that he took off like a rocket. Others say that he got the nickname Rocket because of America's Star-Spangled Banner and the line, "Rocket's Red Glare." They said that his eyes had the fiery intensity of the rocket's red glare. And nobody's eyes burn with the intensity of Maurice the Rocket Richard. In the mid-1950s, the racial tension between the French and English Canadians had reached its peak. Rocket Richard was the most famous and beloved Frenchman in all of Canada. The fact that the French were still treated like second-class citizens in their own country contributed to the Rocket's red glare. Coach Irvin thought that he was the master of being able to manipulate and control Rocket Richard's fiery rage. And he was looking forward to working with a young player from the Chicoutimi Saguenéens named Rocky Bartlett. When Jimmy was called up by the Canadiens, it was pursuant to a provision in the A, B, and C forms that allowed a player to be called up for up to 5 games with the Montreal Canadiens without having to sign a standard player's contract. Basically, it was an audition and was referred to as being brought up for a cup of coffee. Jimmy was scheduled to make his NHL debut on December 29, 1954, in a game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. When his flight arrived in Toronto for his big moment that he had waited his whole life for, the guy who had lectured me one day when I was a teenager over and over again about how I needed to be more responsible and use common sense, Jim the Terror Bartlett realized that he had forgotten his ice skates back in Chicoutimi. I could only imagine the lecture he must have received from Dick Irvin when he told him that he forgot his skates and was unable to play in Toronto that night for his debut. The press, of course, had a field day and were already labeling Jimmy Bartlett as a colorful character in the league. Jimmy Bartlett eventually made his NHL debut playing against the Chicago Blackhawks on January 6, 1955 at the Montreal Forum. His dad was there at the game working as an usher, and all of his friends showed up to root for the hometown boy. Dick Irvin put Jimmy on a line with Floyd Curry and his buddy from the Cincinnati Mohawks, Donnie Marshall. Jimmy got his first NHL penalty at 14:06 in the first period for holding. The goalie for the Blackhawks was Al Rollins, who the year before was the Hart Trophy winner for the league's MVP. When Rocky got out of the penalty box, he took a pass from Doug Harvey and he was on a one-on-one breakaway and scored on Al Rollins. The Montreal Forum erupted as Jimmy scored his first NHL goal after playing less than 10 minutes. Unfortunately, referee Red Story ruled Bartlett offside and the goal was negated. The Canadiens won the game 6-0 with a Jacques Plante shutout behind 2 goals by Jean Beliveau. When asked what it was like preparing for his first game, sharing the locker room with legends such as Rocket Richard, Jimmy recalls that Rocket Richard was covered up in so much body hair, he looked like he was wearing a fucking gorilla suit. Coach Dick Irvin beamed after Bartlett's performance in his debut and said that he loved his style. The final game of Jimmy's audition took place on January 8, 1955 against the Boston Bruins at the Montreal Forum. Jean Beliveau scored the only goal for the Habs in a game that ended in a 1-1 tie. Rocky spent 2 minutes in the penalty box on a kneeing penalty. After the game, Jimmy's dad, who was an usher at the game that night, told him that he should stop trying to hit everybody and should just concentrate on playing hockey. However, Jimmy stopped listening to his dad a long time ago, and nobody was going to tell Jimmy Bartlett how to play hockey. The press, on the other hand, loved Jimmy Bartlett's style. After his audition, they believed that he was immediately ready for the big time. According to the press, Bartlett is a fighting type of player, a la Murph Chamberlain, who likes to exchange body checks with his rivals, whether they be bigger than him or not. He should be very popular with Coach Dick Irvin, who is a great admirer of a rugged player such as Chamberlain and Bartlett. The Rock gives 100% of his efforts each second he is on the ice. Jimmy may miss a little finesse, but makes up for it with his fighting spirit and won't back up from no one no matter what size, which is a sign of success in the National Hockey League. His style was made to measure for the NHL. It is certain that he would be a regular in the big league soon. Murph Chamberlain, the player that Bartlett was being compared to, was a center for the Montreal Canadiens' 2 Stanley Cup victories during the 1940s under Dick Irvin. Murph was a ferocious back-checker and excellent penalty killer, but had a reputation as a wild hothead. Dick Irvin loved him, and you would refer to him as being a real stirrer-upper, who was once suspended for throwing his stick at a linesman and was fined for fighting a PA announcer during a game. In other words, Jimmy Bartlett was the exact type of player that Dick Irvin was looking for. The Habs made no secret that they wanted to make changes at left wing. Eddie Mazur had a knee operation at the beginning of the season, which caused him to miss a lot of games, plus he wasn't playing up to expectations. The team was also very concerned about Dickie Moore, their top line left winger, who had previously led the junior Canadiens to the Memorial Cup during his days in junior. The team was concerned that Dickie Moore had been plagued by injuries ever since he broke into the NHL. Dickie Moore had a surgery on his shoulder during the off-season, which required him to wear a harness whenever he was playing. Immediately after Jimmy Bartlett's 3-day debut, General Manager Frank Selke announced that both Dickie Moore and Eddie Mazur were being put on the trade block. As Jimmy returned back to Chicoutimi to finish the season, Jimmy's future never looked brighter. Jimmy immediately got back into the groove upon rejoining the Saguenéens of Chicoutimi after his stint with Montreal. He scored a goal in each of the 3 games against the Valleyfield Braves that they played that month, and that was followed up by a goal in both games against the Montreal Royals. On February 24th, 1955, against the Shawinigan Falls Cataracts, Rocky got into a stick-swinging fight against Eddie Kacher, and they both were thrown out of the game with match misconducts and a mandatory fine of $50. The next day, Jimmy showed up at the Cartier Theater wearing dark sunglasses and holding a tin cup as he pretended to be a blind, homeless beggar asking for alms for the poor to help pay his fines. Jimmy scored a goal in the Chicks' 5-3 victory over the Royals. In that game, Montreal defenseman Jack Bowness brought the crowd up booing when he tangled with Jim Bartlett and had to be held tightly by officials while trying to renew his scrap with the Chicoutimi Terror. On the last game of the season, the Chicks defeated the Montreal Royals at the Montreal Forum 3-2 in an exciting game. Rocky fired the game winner at 14:48 in the third period, at which point the fans went crazy and started throwing trash and litter all over the ice. In the playoffs, the Chicks fell to the Shawinigan Falls Cataracts in 6 games. The Cats, featuring goaltender Bob Perreault and defenseman Jean-Guy Talbot, defeated the Montreal Royals in the finals to win the championship. According to the press, Rocky Bartlett was the overwhelming favorite to win the Rookie of the Year. However, the press was wrong. I don't know who won the Rookie of the Year that year, but it wasn't Jimmy Bartlett. In 1964, the entire world was obsessed with Beatlemania. Millions of girls would spend their days in school daydreaming and fantasizing about marrying Paul McCartney. The boys in school would daydream about what it would be like to actually be one of the Beatles, to play in the world's greatest band and have thousands of girls screaming their lungs out. It was the fantasy of many young boys. Who knows, maybe one of the Beatles might get sick and they might need someone to replace them. And the fantasy would continue until the school bell would ring and reality would kick back in. Fantasies like this don't happen in real life. Or do they? On June 3rd, 1964, on the eve of the Beatles' 1964 Austra-Asian tour, Ringo became severely ill with tonsillitis and was hospitalized. Rather than canceling the tour, the Beatles hired unknown session drummer Jimmy Nicol to take Ringo's spot for a week while he recuperated. First, they gave him the Beatles' haircut. Then they put him in one of the Beatles' collarless jackets, and he was part of the group. Screaming fans who saw the Beatles play in Copenhagen, Denmark, and 2 concerts in the Netherlands, and Hong Kong, and 2 concerts in Australia, did not see Ringo Starr on the drums. Instead, they saw Jimmy Nicol. Only 3 people in the world know what it was like to stand on that stage performing in front of screaming fans during the height of Beatlemania: Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and Jimmy Nicol, who for a brief moment was able to live a dream that millions would have given anything and everything to have been able to experience. While Rocky Bartlett was finishing up his season with Chicoutimi, the Montreal Canadiens were gearing up for the playoffs. The Rocket was leading the league in scoring in a tight scoring race with teammate Boom Boom Geoffrion. In Richard's long and illustrious career, he had never led the league in scoring, and the fans were rooting him on. Earlier in the season, Boom Boom Geoffrion was suspended by league president Clarence Campbell. Many Montreal fans at the time thought that the suspension was racially motivated because Geoffrion was French. In response, after Maurice Richard wrote a newspaper article in which he referred to President Campbell as being a dictator, the league forced Richard to retract his statement, to his own humiliation and the humiliation of many French Quebecers who were sick of being treated like second-class citizens. On March 13, 1955, while playing the Bruins in Boston, Maurice Richard was involved in one of the most violent incidents in the history of hockey. Richard was victimized by a high stick by the Bruins' Hal Laycoe, which cut open his face and eventually required him to have 5 stitches. After the referee's whistle ended the play, Richard skated over to Laycoe, who had dropped his sticks and gloves and was ready to engage in a fight. However, rather than fighting him, Richard hit Laycoe in the face with his stick. When the linesman attempted to restrain Richard, he broke away, attacked Laycoe, and broke his stick over his opponent's body before he could be separated by the linesman Cliff Thompson. Richard then broke loose again from Thompson and punched the linesman Thompson twice in the face, knocking him unconscious. At his subsequent hearing, Richard claimed that because of the blood in his eyes, he accidentally thought that the official that he punched in the face was actually a Boston Bruin attacking him. President Clarence Campbell did not buy this excuse for a minute. Instead, he gave Richard the longest suspension he had given any player in his 31-year tenure as league president. Campbell announced that Richard will be suspended from all games, both league and playoffs, for the balance of the current season. To put it mildly, the Quebecois were pissed and saw this harsh penalty as a slap in the face to all French Canada. Despite receiving death threats, Clarence Campbell decided that he was going to attend the next game on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, at the Montreal Forum.
It was because of Richard that Montreal was turned inside out on March 17, 1955. League President Clarence Campbell had suspended Richard from the Stanley Cup Series for striking an official, and the Montreal fans were outraged. Campbell, who was no coward, came to the game as though nothing had happened. This was a cup match, but to the fans, the game was secondary to their feud with Campbell. Before long, all the surrounding spectators had fled, leaving the brave Campbells alone to face the angry fans. Even when homemade bombs interrupted the action, the league president remained in his seat. At last, the police insisted on escorting the couple out of the arena, but that didn't stop the rioting. It was one of the wildest uprisings in sports history. Police arrested 74. 25 others were treated in hospitals for injuries, including Campbell himself. Rhubarbs on ice, they're old stuff. But you see king-size riots like this only once in a lifetime.
The Richard Riot had major impacts both on the ice and off the ice. Because of the evacuation during the riot, which resulted in a forfeit, the Canadiens lost first place and home ice advantage to the Detroit Redwings during the playoffs. Boom Boom Geoffrion caught Richard and won the scoring title as fans booed him in Montreal. However, the Richard Riot had an even bigger impact on the cultural, economic, and political history of Quebec. The Richard Riot sparked the beginning of what was called Quebec's Quiet Revolution. Under the new government of Jean Lesage, the economic and political power of French Canadians was greatly improved. The Detroit Red Wings won their first 2 games at home in the 1955 Stanley Cup Finals, and the fans of the Montreal Canadiens were feeling gloomy. When the Chicoutimi Saguenéens were eliminated in the QHL playoffs, Dick Irvin was free to recall his favorite feisty left winger to return to the Habs in Game 3 at the Montreal Forum. So Jimmy Bartlett, the poor English kid from Montreal, with 2 whole games of NHL experience under his belt, was going to replace the suspended Maurice the Rocket Richard, the world's greatest hockey player and the hero of all of French Canada, in the Stanley Cup Finals in his hometown in front of his friends and family, in a Stanley Cup Finals between 2 of the greatest dynasties in NHL history, featuring 14 future NHL Hall of Famers. In 2017, the NHL commemorated its 100th anniversary with a list of the 100 greatest players of all time. 10 of them played in Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals on April 7th, 1955 at the Montreal Forum.
Mosdell bounces Gordie Howe, and when Howe retaliates, he is handed a 2-minute minor penalty and a 10-minute misconduct by referee Bill Chadwick. While Howe is off, Joffrion scores 2 goals in 12 seconds. Here's the first. Doug Harvey starts a scoring play in which 4 players handle the puck. Bert Olmsted finds Beliveau in the clear, and a perfect pass enables Joffrion to slip the puck between Terry Sawchuk's feet. Right after the face-off, Doug Harvey engineers his second scoring play. Joffrion takes his pass. Sawchuk saves from Olmsted in sensational fashion, but Joffrion recovers the loose puck to score his second goal in only 12 seconds. Who kicks the puck into the corner, up along the boards to Vic Stasiuk, across the ice to Red Kelly, who drives in a screen shot. Here, Beliveau regains the puck. Smoothly passes to Joffrion, who manages to tip the puck into the net. He allows Pavelich to regain possession, and his pass out to Stasiuk finds its way into the Montreal net. Here, Jackie Leclerc chases a loose puck. His desperation golf swing, about a 3-iron shot, somehow lands the puck into the net to make the score 4-2. And although Detroit still leads the series 2-1, at the very least, the Canadiens strikes early.
In the Game 3 victory for the Canadiens behind Boom Boom Geoffrion's hat trick, Jimmy did not receive much ice time and was used sparingly. But it didn't matter. Jimmy Bartlett had lived a dream, a fantasy that millions of little Canadian boys would dream about when avoiding long division in primary school. Even if Jimmy never played another second of hockey, it wouldn't matter because he had already experienced the dream of a lifetime. Although Rocky wore number 20 during the regular season for the Canadiens, in the playoffs he wore number 17. He next got his opportunity to play in Game 5 on April 10th, this time in Detroit.
Pronovo took a penalty. Canadiens went after the game's opening goal. Leclerc to Doug Harvey. Across to Beliveau, who unwinds his blistering shot, and Canadiens have the all-important jump goal. Beliveau, tall Glenn Scholes slapped the puck past Jock Plante, and the score is tied. Now the Detroit Red Wings take off and score 4 more goals without a reply from the Canadiens. Butch Bouchard moves to check Del Vecchio along the boards. The puck comes back to Rival. It's knocked down by Del Vecchio, and Howe is in the right place at the right time to score Detroit's second goal. Detroit's Gordie Howe on his way to his 3rd goal of this game, his 19th point in the playoffs, breaking the playoff record established by Toe Blake of Canadiens 11 years before. Off Del Vecchio to Voigt. Bonan tries a turnaround shot. Plante is sprawled far out of his cage. Bonan back to Stasiuk, who shoots it into the empty net. Red Wings win 5-1.
In Game 5, Detroit blew out the Montreal Canadiens 5-1 behind Gordie Howe's hat trick. In that game, Mr. Hockey also broke the record for most points in the playoffs by scoring 8 goals and 11 assists in only 9 games. 10 of the greatest hockey players who ever lived were on the ice that night. Alex Delvecchio, Gordie Howe, Red Kelly, Ted Lindsay, Terry Sawchuk, Jean Beliveau, Bernie Geoffrion, Doug Harvey, Dickie Moore, Jock Plante, all skated in that game. And Jimmy Bartlett did too. Jimmy didn't play in Game 6 or Game 7, but sat on the bench as he watched Alex Delvecchio score 2 goals as the Detroit Red Wings won Game 7 in the Stanley Cup. Despite Jimmy's lack of ice time, sports writer Dick Carroll of the Montreal Gazette wrote that Jimmy was one of the best performers for the Habs in the playoffs. According to the local sports writers, Jimmy Bartlett, the aggressive player with the brilliant future, was set to jump to the NHL the next season. However, at the end of the season, the Montreal Canadiens made a decision that changed Jimmy's future. The Canadiens needed to hold somebody accountable for the riots. The 1955 Stanley Cup Finals were the very first time that the home team won all 7 games. And the only reason the Habs did not have home ice advantage is because of the forfeit caused by the riot. However, more importantly than losing the cup, a violent mob of about 20,000 people burned the city and looted businesses. Somebody needed to be held accountable. The team couldn't blame NHL League President Clarence Campbell, though that's who the fans blamed. And they couldn't blame Richard, who was thought of as a heroic avenger against English oppression. So they blamed the coach, Dick Irvin. After all, Irvin knew about Richard's temper and would purposely push his buttons to set him off during games. The Montreal organization decided that they no longer wanted a head coach who encouraged excessive violent tactics on the ice. So Frank Selke and the Montreal Canadiens unceremoniously terminated the legendary Dick Irvin, who had taken the Montreal Canadiens to the finals 8 times in his career. He was replaced by the great Toe Blake, who would win the Stanley Cup with the Canadiens as their coach for the next 5 consecutive seasons. Within 2 years of leaving the Canadiens, Dick Irvin died of bone cancer. From 1943 to 1952, the Stanley Cup was dominated by Toronto, Detroit, and Montreal, while Boston, Chicago, and New York were perennial cellar dwellers. In an attempt to restore a semblance of parity between these 6 teams, the NHL decided to create a draft of players called the Intra-League Draft, which would allow teams to draft players from other teams. This is similar to how the NHL currently does an expansion draft when a new team is added to the league. Each team was able to protect 18 skaters and 3 goalies in their organization in the draft. If a player was not on the protected list, then that player could be drafted or poached by any other team if they were willing to pay a fee of $15,000 to the team that lost the player. $15,000 now might be chump change, but back then was more than the average salary of the NHL players. The inaugural draft was a bust, with no teams choosing to draft anybody. In fact, prior to the 1955 draft, only 1 player had ever been poached through this draft. Nevertheless, the Montreal Gazette, which labeled Jimmy Bartlett as surefire material for the NHL, predicted that if the Habs didn't put Jimmy on their protected list, then some other team would poach him and they wouldn't be sorry. However, Dick Irvin was no longer the coach of the Canadiens, and after the Richard Riot, volatile, overly aggressive players that Dick Irvin preferred were no longer in demand with Montreal. So Rocky Bartlett was left unprotected for the 1955 draft. That doesn't mean that the Canadiens wanted to get rid of him. He would just be sent back to Chicoutimi and wait for another call-up, which seemed like the most likely scenario. However, Jimmy Bartlett had a secret admirer. The head coach of another NHL team remembered Jimmy from his days playing junior hockey and desperately wanted him. The secret admirer's name was Phil Watson, who used to be the coach of the Quebec Citadels when Jimmy was in junior. In 1952, Bartlett and Phil Watson were both suspended for spitting in each other's faces during a game. The violent, unpredictable Bartlett was a terror to play against, but would be great to have on his own team. So Phil Watson had general manager Muzz Patrick draft Rocky Bartlett. For the first time since high school, Jimmy was no longer part of the Montreal Canadiens organization. He was now owned by the New York Rangers.